Welcome back to the Kriolu podcast. I'm Suely Neves, your host for today, once again, the co founder of Kriolu. And today, joining me is another Suely. Yay! Suele DaSilva. She's our team sales strategist. And I had to take a slow pronunciation on that because it's one of those words that I have a hard time pronouncing. So that will probably be the last time I'll pronounce it for today so that we can have a smooth chat. So, yeah, welcome, Sueli.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited about this. Let's get
Yes,
started.
very excited. We'll talk about the language, about our kids, and about being two women in a startup, right? So, for me, that is a very interesting and important topic to talk about for a number of reasons, and we'll get into that. Um, One thing for us to get straight, our names are spelled different. So if anybody's been to our Kriolu.com website, my Suely, my name is spelled Suely, and Suely, the Silva's name is spelled Suele. I have a very vivid memory when I first got to the US, 12 years old, seventh grade, Dearborn Middle School in Roxbury, Massachusetts. I was in some English class or whatever class it was. The teacher for like weeks would do attendance, and I'm like, why this teacher never calls my name? And then one day I turned to one of the girls. She spoke English. I was still learning, and I asked her, "Can you please go ask the teacher why she's not calling my name? It's been like weeks, and I cannot not have attendance checked. That's not it's not an option here." She went to ask the teacher, and she was American, and she's looking at the list, and she can't in her mind she's not making the connection about how to say my name. So and she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't see your name on the list." And I'm looking at it, I'm like, I can see my name clearly. What it's like she can't see my name. So I pointed at my name. I said, Sueli. And she goes, "Oh, Suely." And I looked at her and I was like, no. I was like, no. I was like, tell her it's no. I was like, she understands no. And I said, no, Sueli. So caught up in that for a very long time, especially as a 12-year-old. I was just like, why is this lady calling me Suli? That's not this like it doesn't make sense. So that was my first, I would say, shock in the U.S. regarding my name. And since I'm always trying to correct people, I know it's hard, especially for American or English speakers to get it right. But it's been a pet peeve of mine since I was 12, and I'm sure you've had that experience.
Yeah, that story is so relatable. You have no idea. Suely is like one of the main one I get called all the time. The other one is like Swella, Swell.
Jeez.
Um, yeah, in school was like the first time, and I'm like, that's not how you pronounce it. But I remember as a child, my dad used to make even my aunts say my name correctly, and he would be so upset. He'd be like, "You better correct them. That is not how you say your name," because they would say Sueli, and my dad was like, no, you need to correct them. Your name does not have an accent. So it's like one aunt on my mom's side and one aunt on his side that still to this day call me Sueli. And whenever he's in the room and he just turns and looks at me, and it's like I'm seven all over again. And I'm like, I better say something because he's going to get upset. So I always have to correct people. Who's like, no, your name is Sueli, not Sueli. Unless I'm like dealing with people and they need to address me or they need to call back and ask for me, then I tell them what the pronunciation is. I have customers who I hand over my business card to follow up, and they're like, oh, so how do you say it? They always ask because they always
Yes.
say, or like if they go on and say it themselves, they always say something like Sewell. Is it Swell? And I'm like, no, Swelly. But they're like, oh my God, that's so pretty. But they always butcher it. I have a customer who calls for me all the time, and she always says Swella. She never says it
What?
right.
It's Swella.
Always. And it's just like a constant thing. And I'm like, oh, I always think back to my dad, you better correct them. So I do.
Yeah, it's always about identity for me because when I went to the US, I was, the youngest of three. I wasn't too excited about going to the US. My mom was there. Of course, I was excited. I was going to be with my mother, but I was like through and through, I want to stay in Kavir kind of thing. So it was a lot of that almost rebelling against me being in the US. I'm like, at least you're going to get my name right. But that was just the pronunciation of my first name. The last name is Neves, right? So people would pronounce it Neves. Dad was like Suely Neves, and it was a hot take for me, and I would correct people all the time, Suely Neves, because it was such a big identity thing for me. I was like, this is who I am as, Cabo Verdean, Criolla. So I have stories for days, and that's probably a whole full episode just talking about different name pronunciations in our experiences in the US. So what I
Totally.
really wanted us to talk a little bit more about is now we are women in tech. This is brand new to me. I've started different organizations since I was very young. I started a business when I was in my early 20s, but I've never been involved in a startup before. And that alone is already like a big, let me say, a big change or a big shift in my experiences from before. Criolish I wasn't always the only one. In the beginning, yes, it was just me and Edmar. We had another one, Sophie. She was with us for a while, and she is actually a linguistics. She's just finished her PhD. And it was interesting to have somebody with that kind of linguistics experience in the early stages of Criolish because she brought in that very, expertise and thinking, and then obviously the academic part of it. And then we had another one who came in, which was Darlene. She was on the social media part and doing some work with us. So for some time, I was the only woman on the team with the rest of the guys. Hey, look, I'm the only woman out here, and I'm also the oldest out of the whole crew. I remember telling Edmar when it was just back to being me on the team as a woman, I was like, our next recruit or anybody who approaches us, it needs to be a woman. He's like, no, I agree. And we were even looking at like if it was going to be an engineer, we were going to be very intentional about it. And then we didn't have to do much. Somehow you came into play. Because the interesting thing about the team of Criollos right now, we didn't necessarily go out there and say, hey folks, we're looking for people to join our team. It just happened organically. LinkedIn had a lot to do with some of it. Another part, like Joelson, he came in because of an event that Edmar had participated in, and that's how him and Joelson got connected. Even though I knew Joelson from other programs, but most of folks who have joined us, it's been like almost an organic experience, not necessarily because we went looking for people. It was almost as if people found us. And I remember your name. I saw that you used to engage a lot with us through LinkedIn. And when Edmar, mentioned that you wanted to get on board, and you all had a conversation, and I was like, oh yes, I noticed that she likes our stuff. She's always I was like, she's always engaging with us on LinkedIn. I was like, so that's a good sign. I was like, we are open, obviously, to anybody who enjoys what we do and actually, comments, likes, shares, our post. That's always a big plus. So I was happy in that sense and excited that it was someone who was actually following us and that could possibly join the team with the type of skills that you have from the sales perspective. And that's the other part, like bringing a team into it is important. But the fact that you are a woman, that was a big plus for me. And I was like, it's not an engineer, but I would take her. So, and I remember Edmar was like, check, have a chat with her and see how you feel about it. And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna be able to get on a call, probably, good 30 minutes to get to know her. Me and you talked for like 2 hours, if you don't remember that
Yeah,
day.
I do
And I was like, we gotta
remember.
go.
I do remember.
I was like, we really gotta go. But being part, it for me is very important to have another woman on the call because we do think different, we function different, we see things different, and it's always important to have that balance and to have that, you know, the connection to be able to talk to someone that if I say something that you're gonna understand. And I'll give you an example before I'll let you weigh in on this coming on board with Criolish. When we had Darlene was on like one day we were talking something about colors and how to attract people. I forgot what was the conversation about. And I said, look, I am in my 40s and I'm still in love with color pens. I love anything that has colors. Like I will still write different kind of colors in my notebook. And then I went into how in high school, that's how I used to do. And that it was like, oh my God, I'm not the only one. And me and her during a staff call, like our sync up, we had a whole moment and we completed like the guys just they were just there staring at us because video calls during our sync up. They just let us have it because me and her had a whole moment. Oh my God, we are both love colors. I'm not the only one. And it was like it was such a girl moment that I was like, this is why I love having another woman on on this team. So I really
Sure,
wanted to
for
get
sure.
your feel for it in terms of being, coming into a startup and then, a tech startup and being a woman coming in and knowing that at least you had one waiting for you on this side.
I mean, definitely. So to give you a backstory of how I got exposed to Kriolish, it was actually through Sophie. I don't know what the story behind her meeting my sister is, but my sister just had a baby, so she was on maternity leave, and as part of her PhD research, and she was interviewing my sister. And so after the interview was
Interesting.
over, and she was just like, "Well, would you like to contribute to my PhD research?" So we got to talking, and then we scheduled a time together, and we did our interview. And then she told me about Criolish, and I was like, "Oh my God, that's such a good initiative! I've always wanted to have some resources like that, especially because my kids are not fluent in Criollo, and I'm big on languages. I speak four languages. So it's important to me that my kids, at the very least, learn Criollo. And so Sophie told me about Edmar in Criollish, and I told her I would be more than happy to connect with him and contribute to what he's doing. And soon enough, I got a text from Edmar asking to schedule a meet. I visited the site, and I think you guys still had the name with the C, if I'm not mistaken. And
Uh-huh.
I
Yes.
remember reading, yeah, I remember reading the blog and going through pretty much everything that was on the site. And I remember looking you up on LinkedIn, and I came upon this blog post about your work with the Basketball Federation and your husband and the
Oh
kids and everything else
wow.
you had going on. And
Oh
I
my
remember
God. That thing is
thinking,
still out
I
there.
don't, yeah, and I remember thinking, I don't know if I can say this on here, but I was like, oh my gosh, she's such a badass. And I was like, wow. I was really, really impressed. But then we had the meeting, and then Matt asked me pretty much all the questions he wanted to ask to see if I would be interested in being a good fit for the role. But unfortunately, not to get too personal, I was going through my divorce, and it was pretty messy. It wasn't a very good time in my life. And I was really honest with him. I said, you know, I understand what you need and I know I can give it to you, but right now I just can't. I was like, I cannot commit to what you need from me because I know that I'm not in the mental space to give you guys that. And because I believe so much in what you're doing, I refuse to hold you guys back because I have so many personal issues going on. But we still stayed in touch. I still kept up with everything you guys were doing, as you can attest to, that I was always engaged with everything you were doing. And then I think a few months went by and he reached out again, asking to meet again, and he still wanted me on board. And by then things had gotten better. So I said, you know what? Why not? And I remember the first feedback that I gave him was that the website looked outdated. I think I remember saying something to the effect of it looked like an eBay site. It's very congested, very confusing. And I remember how well he took it. And I wasn't really taken back by it, but I noticed that he had a different reaction about my feedback. And it was very different from what I've been used to being in the sales and tech world where women are seen like you can't handle family, personal life and still do this. You know, in my role still to this
As if
day,
as if
I always have
your
to,
opinion doesn't matter.
or that I'm unfit to give such opinion.
That's the
And
opinion.
and
I see. Uh-huh.
I understood that him and I could work well because he didn't take offense to it. He actually followed up with questions like, what makes you say that? And my answers were always based on me being a user or someone who's going to consume the service and the product, and also a salesperson. Because if I was the user and I had to navigate through that site the way it looked before, I probably would have given up mid process because it's just too much work to find what I need. And I don't know if that's what prompted him to update the site, but he did. And here we are now. We have a very, very good site, and we still have updates that are coming. And, but yeah, bottom line is that I saw myself working with him because I felt like I can be frank, I can be honest, and I can say it just like it's supposed to be said and not sugarcoat anything. And he's just going to take it as a positive feedback and he's going to take action. And so that's why I decided to come on board.
Thank you for sharing that part, and especially, with on a more personal note. Not everybody is comfortable just sharing it and being honest about that process. And good for you for knowing when not to do something. And a lot of times as women, we take on so much and we forget about ourselves, and that's just how we are conditioned to function most of the time. And we just keep taking it on, and learning how to say no is, I think, is one of the most self-empowering things that a woman can do. I learned how to say no to people when I was in my early 20s. I should say, well, maybe mid 20s, before I even had family. And I'm glad I learned that lesson very early on, because I used to do a lot of things. I was always involved, and sometimes people can take advantage of you when they see that you're the type to get things done, and you're hands on, and all of that, and you feel like you can do a lot. Especially the younger you are, the more you think you can take the world on, which is an amazing thing. But learning how to say no, such an important part of who I am now and what I'm doing. Just the other day, my husband asked me for a particular thing. Someone asked them if they think I would be interested in joining, and I was like, not now. I was like, right now, I was like, I really got to put energy into Kriolu. We just left the National Basketball Federation a few months back, and I need to put a lot of time not only into Kriolu and my other personal projects that I have with Turaki Entertainment. And I was like, I can't get involved in other things, and I'm not even in a bad place. And sometimes when we are in a bad place, we don't see things clearly. So I commend you for even being able to say, this is not the right time for me, and be able to notice that and not put yourself in a position to then not do what you can do so well. And the thing with Criollish is, Edmar and I always talk about, we need to put stuff out there so we can see how people react, right? So when we started Criollish, it was still spelled with a C. We, like, if you go back to it, our eyes are probably gonna hurt. I know, and we knew, like, we were very aware of that. And one of the reasons why Joelson came on board is because he's a designer. Launching relaunching the brand, all of that, was a big part of our process. And then getting feedback from people to see, okay, we know this needs to change. And when you hear it from people, you're like, okay, so we are in the right direction. So he does like when people give feedback. He wants to know the whys, and understand how people think. And you always, every time you put something out, the best thing is for the audience and the people who like your product to tell you, what it's all about. If somebody's trying to get you on board, off the bat, that's like a sales point as well. Like, when
Yeah.
you join, yes, your ideas and your opinions, they will be heard. Then otherwise, like, how do you retain talent? So you recruit, or if somebody comes to you or you need somebody on your team, you still have to be careful who you bring in on your team. It can't just be anybody. And one thing that, I don't know if you ever had this experience, if you've been in other organizations, volunteer, or nonprofits, or whatnot. Like, at least with my experience, a lot of times when you get into an organization and you have an idea, or you're leading an organization for whatever it is, nonprofit to profit, people will have opinions of how you should run it. And you always got to be careful, up to what point do you take that advice, and who you're taking the advice from. You know what I mean? Because somebody, like, if you don't know
Mhm.
a person and they tell you, hey, like, your website is whack, and that's the extent of the feedback, then that's not telling me anything. But if you say, hey, your website is whack or something is not right, I'm having difficulties going from A to B, that's a different feedback, right? So, for you to actually be able to do that and tell him this is why, it's like the website feels like it needs to be, I need to navigate, I need to have a better navigation experience. That's a user feedback, like being very clear about that. So that's definitely something that we appreciate, for getting that feedback from you and from anybody who has recommendations for us to do better. And I want you to tell me a little bit more about, did it cross your mind that you were joining a startup, a tech startup, or you were just thinking, Kriolish, I love the product, I like what you're doing, but you didn't think necessarily of the type of organization that you were getting into, being a tech startup, and with your own professional experience, you in sales, but you're connected already with tech.
I definitely didn't see it as I'm joining a tech startup. I didn't see it that way. To me, it was just like I'm joining a movement and this is
Ah,
bigger than us.
interesting.
To me, it's more than just a product. It's a community. It's retaining our culture, our history, and being someone who's fluent in four languages. I always tell people it's like you can't experience a culture without having the language. It's like you're kind of experiencing it in black and white if you don't have the language. I think back on a one-on-one that I had with Edmad probably last month when he brought it up, and because I told him I was looking for a sales coach, and his feedback was make sure you focus on people who have experience in tech startup. Um, and that was like a moment for me. It's just like, oh, yeah, that is what we are. But I never really saw it that
Yeah.
way. To me, it was just more like we're about to literally bring so much innovation and so much attention to our language because people do know who we are. They know our music, they know our culture, they know that we're amazing people and we're friendly and we love to tell people about our culture, but there's like a whole side of it that people don't get to experience if they don't speak the language. And to me, more than preserving the language, it's exposing the country and exposing who we are beyond the food and the music, because language is so important. And to me, like the biggest accomplishment as far as my contribution to this team in what we're doing is really getting our country to make Kriolu an official language, to have it in healthcare systems, to use it in our educational system, in businesses, all just remove Portuguese, make Portuguese a second language. I mean, we just
Yeah, not remove.
celebrated.
It's the second language part. Like you said, learning, we all learn so many
Yeah,
languages. So it's more which one we need to give priority to, and understanding that it is our first language and everything else is second or third or fourth, then you treat it different when you understand that that's what that is. And for me, on like being the whole startup tech, it's also a reminder all the time, because when we started, it was purely out of, we love Creole, everybody should have access to it kind of approach, or I love expressions, how all of these things about the language, because we are native speakers, right? So we understand the language, we feel the language, it's all about who we are. And doing something like this feels almost like a natural take. Yes, we should be pushing our language. We should be doing something like this to make it to give the value that it should have. But thinking about it from tech a tech startup point of view, it's a whole different ballgame, because then now you got to balance between the emotional part of your language to the machine that's gonna push what your idea. Even if it's a movement, how do you push the movement, right? And I have a lot to learn. So now I'm always looking into women in tech. How do you run it? How do you make sure, we don't lose focus with our goals, and then to maintain this whole piece of our language, and then everything else is linked to the culture. Like you said, most people know Creole uh, through the music, right? And we have an opportunity here to not change their narrative, but add to it. That it's not just music, but now we also want people to be intrigued to learn the actual language of the music that folks love so
Correct.
much, and leads us to, you know, our roles as mothers. We're not just women in this, part of Criollish. We're also mothers, so we have added value into and added interest into all of this in terms of, raising little munchkins to that's going to carry on legacy one way or another. And language is legacy, right? What's interesting about language for me, I don't know if this happens to you with people, because you speak multiple languages. I speak multiple languages. So sometimes when I'm in front of someone who speaks a particular language and I speak that language, I switch. Let me give you an example for Portuguese. You have Portuguese from Portugal and Portuguese from Brazil. If I'm in front of someone who
Right.
speaks Portuguese from Portugal, I will speak Portuguese from the continent of Portugal. If I'm in front of a Brazilian, I will switch my Portuguese to the Brazilian Portuguese really quick. So the same thing when it comes down to English here in Cape Verde. My husband and I, we both speak English all the time. Our language of communication has always been English and Creole. And
Right.
the English
Right.
always took a front stage of all of it. So when we had our kids, especially Milo, um, it, we did not intentionally have her speak English as her first language. My daughter learned a
Mm.
whole lot of things. First, were all in English, and eventually Creole, and then when she got to school, eventually, in Portuguese as well. So it's interesting that a lot of folks get confused when they hear my kids speak fluent English, and they're like, yeah, but then Caver. I'm like, yeah, it's because we spoke at home. And then you have technology, right? So you have access to Netflix and stuff like that, that eventually also contribute to them developing their language. And it was funny with my kids in terms of Creole. And then I definitely want to take your hear your piece on being on that side of the world about getting your kids to speak Creole. Is that when they started going to school here in Cavet, no matter which school you're going to, Portuguese is the official language, like we were saying earlier, right? So they teach Portuguese at school. My kids are actually at a Portuguese school already, as it is. For a while, when my kids were a little bit younger, now they're 12 and 9, it was like, oh, I don't speak Creole. I'm like, what do you mean? And that drove me crazy. I'm like, you are in Cavet. You cannot say that to me that you're not going to speak Creole. But now my son speaks, like, he speaks Creole from Santiago. He's learning from his friends in school. But Mila is more like, I don't speak Creole. I was like, look, we're gonna take care of this later. It's interesting to see how, even though you are in a country where your official language, I mean, your language is Creole, how all of that can shift because of the environment. So whatever you expose your
Right.
kids to is what they're gonna feed. And being in the US, I never lost Creole, because the environment between my mom, my sisters, and we lived in Dorchester, where every other corner it was music down the street. It was a Caverdian restaurant. It was a Caverdian barber. We were around Cavirt one way or another in Dorchester. How is it for you to deal with that, where they're away from the culture? How is it for you to manage your kids, especially at this young age of preteen, teen, and then they might not think it's cool right now to speak Creole?
So it's hard for me because I've always wanted them to learn. I'm here speaking 4 languages and I get paid more than my colleagues just because I have that extra language. My other thing too, my biggest concern was that, I kept thinking back how my cousins who had their children here over 20 years ago, anytime they visited Cape Verde, they were just having to have the kids with them at all times because they didn't speak the language and nobody else spoke English around them. And so I always tell them, I was like, if you go to CV, just know I'm not translating for you. You're just going to be isolated. You're going to be an outsider in every interaction that we have. So you better get on and start learning. But what I tell people all the time, don't let my kids fool you. I speak Kriolu at least 50% of the time, and they respond to me in English 100% of the time. They hate this, but the rule is when they're asking me, oh, mom, can I go out with my friends? Or they want something that is clearly a want and not a need, I challenge them. If you can ask me this in Kriolu and get it right, the answer will be yes. And they always go, Mom, that's not fair. But I kid you not, the Kriolu just comes out, which they claim not to speak. It just comes out. And it's amazing when I see when they're talking to my mom who doesn't speak English. And I'm always in awe when I hear them use words I never thought they knew. It's always such a proud moment for me because I'm like, oh, it's actually working. They pretend they don't speak English, but when they Criollo, but when they are in a situation where Criollo is the only language they can speak to communicate, it comes out. It just comes out because again, they've always been exposed to the language. It's just by default they've never chosen to speak Criollo as a first language. English is their first language and they always opt to use English. But if they're in a situation where they have to speak Criollo, it comes out. I remember when I took my oldest two, I only had two kids at the time. I took them to Cabo Verde and 2014, I want to say. And for the first 3 days, they couldn't play with their cousins. They didn't speak to anyone. Every time they were spoken to, they turned around and looked at me. But I kid you not, after 3 days, they were coming to me and speaking Criollo to me and telling me they wanted such and such. We came back and everybody in my family were in shock because they spoke Criollo so well that you would think they were born there. So my advice to mothers, don't think that they're too young to start learning or that it's too late. It's not. It just normalize that habit for them. Just switch it. Start speaking Criollo to them. Start testing them. If you're gonna say, "Hey, here's a piece of bread," say it in English and repeat it in Criollo. That's literally how my sister is doing it. I have a 2-year-old niece now, and I tell my sister all the time, if you're gonna say the word bread, say bread and say pão. And I kid you not, this girl has a lot of Creole words, and sometimes it's really funny to hear her because she has some words in Creole that she doesn't know the word in English, or it's vice versa. And it's really funny because she kind of switches it up and she's speaking English and Creole at the same time to kind of complete her sentence. But I tell people don't focus on the fact that they're not going to know which language they're speaking. Eventually, it will all fall into place and it will all make sense to them. Bring your kids around your grandmothers and your great grandmothers because it is going to help with the learning the language. I remember my 10-year-old now, when she was like 4, Bulasha was like her favorite thing, and she always knew that my mom had some. So she would go to my mom and she would just grab her hand, bring her to the kitchen, and just say the word Vulasha. Now, she either goes and grabs it. If she doesn't see it, she'll like, Vovo, undi Vulasha sta? Like, she will say the full sentence. They always they're very nervous about it and they're hesitant, but they know it. They'll say it if they have to.
You do have parents who are now second or third generation, born in the US, or even first generation born in the US, and they might not speak the language. And I think this is when Criolish comes into play, where we're giving resources and tools to parents who are not in a situation like us, who speak the language and can actually put this type of plan in place for their kids. Sometimes it's that confidence to speak it so they don't, we're not making fun of them or anything like that. Because anybody who's learning a new language, your tendency is to do that. Like even in the US, if you're learning French or Spanish, or let me just say Spanish for the most part, which is the next language that most likely you'll find in at high school, for instance, if you say the word, if you pronounce it wrong or whatever, people will make fun of you, especially if you have a native speaker around you. So a lot of times languages, people hesitate to speak it or to learn a new language, whether they're connected to it or not culturally, is because they're scared. Like the level of confidence is not there. They're afraid of making mistakes. And we gotta figure out a way how to jump that, right? How to get over um, that fear of making mistakes when you're speaking, and then teaching Creole. If you speak the language and you're trying to teach it to your kids, there's always that resistance, especially when they get to the teenage years. I think that's when it gets more like, why am I trying to speak this language? But then when they get older, they're like, oh, why didn't you teach me Creole? Like I've seen this happen to a lot of my friends. Like their kids, as they got older, they're like, why didn't you teach me Creole? And they're like, are you kidding me? Like I was trying to teach you for the longest time and you didn't want to learn it. And I think it's more like, how do you teach your kids so they don't feel like you're forcing it on them, but also that they like it. Like here at home, for instance, I'm learning Korean, and my kids now they even ask me how to say this word or that word or whatever, and I'm very open about learning. Or I don't know that word yet. I need to go look it up. And my kids discovered Duolingo in school, and Mars decided that he wanted to learn Spanish, and Mila decided that she wanted to learn French. And they both have a goal. They all have a goal why they wanted to learn Spanish and French. Mars wanted to learn Spanish because he said when he gets older, he's going to be Spider-Man, and he's Miles Morales, and he's in New York. He has to be able to speak Spanish. That's why he wanted to learn, because he wants to be ready to be Spider-Man. And
He
Mila
can't be
is
him without
one.
the Spanish.
So he already made, his mind. And Mila wants to, started learning French because of what is the name of that cartoon? She's from France. Ladybug,
Cat
I think it
Noir,
is.
the ladybug thing. Yeah,
Yes,
Ayla's
the whole
obsessed with
ladybug
it.
thing. So she started learning French because she wants to go to Paris one day. So even kids at this level, there's a like they have a goal, even though their goal is it's all linked to a movie and a cartoon, but it's a location. Like, and they're no different from adults. Like, so in learning, either developing Creole or getting your kids to develop Creole, try to get them to be from a goal standpoint. Like you talk about career, like you're gonna need this in your career, especially if you're in the New England area. If you speak Creole, that's a big plus. But in general, like what else does that mean? What else can that mean for you, career wise, personally? And you never know when it's going to open doors, because you speak more than one language. And sometimes that's what you need to, if you're trying to get your kid to speak Creole, maybe that's it. Like sit down with them if they're at that age that you can actually, especially if you can have a conversation. Like if you were to learn Creole, what would be your goal? Like what is it that you think you can learn Creole? It might be that they want to speak with their grandparents a little bit more because they love them to pieces. Whatever it is, it might be for, you know, aspiration, dreams of something else that Creole is going to open doors for them. And maybe it might be they want to sing in Creole. Whatever it is, I think if parents can get their kids to be more excited about learning Creole and not being like you're forcing it because you're supposed to because you're Creole. So I think, as a parent, to really think about that, like for whoever, the parents out there, you're trying to figure it out with your kids, try to think, what is it that you can do that you can actually help your kids learn the language and not feel like it's being forced. And these are some of the things that are very important for us here at Creolish, because right now we're putting stuff out there, and soon we're going to have courses rolled out that as adults and young adults can actually learn the language. But also we're open to ideas, like as a parent, what is it that you think Creolish can really help you with to get your kids a little bit more excited about learning, especially when you have different age factors that come into play in terms of learning the language. And it's just in the beauty of learning, and like you said, connecting with the culture. And if it means connecting with your culture, that's even more powerful than connecting with other cultures when you speak other language that are not your own. And I really hope that this is what Creolish will do to the Cabo Verdean folks and descendants and others who are around the community. And even for me, I learned with Creolish. So I'm hoping that this is what we're also offering other people, like that you actually get to learn from Creolish. And my kids, they're all about Creolish. They know about Creolish. They're excited about Creolish. Mars says that he wants to create the app because he asked me, where's the app? So he wants to create the app. And I think one of your kids also wants to be involved with Creolish. So I think even what we're doing now, like the importance of what we're doing with Creolish as a
Yeah,
company.
absolutely. Ayla is always part of our sync up. Um, and she said something to me a couple weekends ago that she's gonna run this company one day.
We, like you said, you don't underestimate your kids, whether they're little or they're teenagers or they're young adults.
You gotta feed their curiosity for sure. Um,
Yes.
I agree
Well,
100%. I mean, my oldest speaks a little bit of Mandarin, and she took that for 3 years. And I
Wow,
don't know if you remember our conversation from yesterday that I shop a lot at an Asian market because I'm a vegan, and so a lot of their noodles are plant-based. And so when I go there, if there's no one available, and sometimes like there's nobody there that speaks English either, and all of their packagings, they're not in English. And so I used to take her with me, and I'm like, "Oh, Nia, what does this say?" And she would read it for me. And I'm like, "I'm looking at ingredients. I don't want any eggs in my noodles. Like, can you read it for me?" And she understands it. And she learned from a native speaker. And she always talks about how she enjoys their culinary, specifically the bakery part of it. And she actually has, she's in a culinary program at the moment and going into her junior year. And she always talks about going to China to learn techniques of their
nice.
bakery because she loves their baking um, techniques, and she loves their snacks. And she's always asking me to go to a Chinese bakery to buy them. And then my other one also took 2 years of Chinese, but now she's learning Spanish. What's a motivator there? She wants to travel abroad for school. And I always remind them,
Awesome.
like, you could also do
Love that.
that for Cabo Verde. Like, you could always do that.
So
But guess
add
what?
one more to your
If you
bucket track.
right, if you don't speak Criollo, you're gonna go to Cabo Verde and you're gonna go to school there, and English is gonna be your only tool. How are you gonna experience the culture if you don't have the language?
Yes,
And so I always
certain
tell
parts.
them a lot can change. You might go into college and say, I would really love to go study abroad. And that language is definitely going to be a barrier now. I spoke about the struggle of competing with English, making Criollo feel relevant. And our platform is built to solve that problem. We're creating a digital space where the language is not only accessible, but it's fun and engaging. We're going beyond simple flashcards. We have audio pronunciations from native speakers and the context rich examples and lessons that are bite-sized and practical. This allows parents to share a word or a phrase with their children in moments notice, where whether they're in a car or just a few minutes at home, Creolish makes it easy for the language to fit into busy family life. So it's not another chore, but it's a natural part of their daily routine. And that's how I try to make it. My advice to parents just starting out is to release the pressure to be perfect. Don't feel like you have to
Yes,
be a fluent teacher or that every interaction has to be a formal lesson.
I
Small
agree.
and start small and be consistent with it.
I
That's really
agree.
what it is. I mean, I've been learning Haitian Creole for about 2 years now, and my motivation was just to be able to communicate with my customers. Because we get a lot of customers who speak Haitian Creole and they're newcomers and they don't have English. Most of them speak Spanish because they've either migrated to Cuba or Peru or Venezuela, so they have a little bit of Spanish, which I can help with. But when it comes down to doing business and sales, I can attest that customers are more likely to say yes and close the deal if that transaction is happening in their own language. I have a lot of Brazilian customers, for example, that speak fluently English, but they will only do business with me, and we never interact in English. We always interact in Portuguese. And I feel like people don't realize that there's a different level of connection with people when you both can speak the same language. And so I encourage people to just keep going, don't give up. If your child is not interested right now, still continue to speak it around them.
One more thing to think about. We all can be part of pushing more for Creole to continue and preserve it and teach it however way we possibly can. And again, we're here for that. We're open. Let us know. Get on our website. Tell us what you think and what is it what kind of resource we can be for you, especially for your kids, if you think that's a challenge that you have. There's so much more that we can say and talk about here as parents and trying to maintain the culture and how Creolish is a big part of our process now. and a big part of who we are. And we can definitely be here for another 2 hours for sure. So, I just want to thank you, Suely, for making the time. These are great insights, great things that we talked about. I'm really looking forward to what we're about to push forward, and we're gonna be here as women in startup tech, and maybe in another episode like a year from now, and be like, so how do you feel about that now? So we'll have more. And to our listeners, we appreciate you sticking with us. It's probably going to be a long episode. We'll see how it goes on the editing side. And remember to visit our website, Kriolu.com. Follow us on social media, and do give us your feedback. We truly appreciate it, and we hope you enjoyed this episode. Until next time, thank you, Suely.
Definitely,
Thank you,
definitely.
everybody. Have a
Thank
good
you.
one.
Thank you for having me.
Peace.